The training hall at Fort Valor buzzed with the restless energy of new recruits, boots shuffling on the mats as they waited for the next instruction. Master Sergeant Elena Rowe stood calm at the center, her posture sharp, her presence steady. The heat of the afternoon pressed down through the metal roof, and the sound of distant cadence calls drifted in from outside. Then the air shifted. Private First Class Mason Caldwell stepped forward, a grin tugging at his mouth. His arrogance filling the room like smoke. He raised his voice, louder than needed, and his words carried the weight of a challenge. Before anyone could process what was happening, he lunged at her, reaching in a way that broke every rule of training. A move meant to mock and humiliate. The formation froze. The echo of boots and whispers died instantly, leaving only the sound of breath caught in throats. Time seemed to slow as every pair of eyes locked on them. Rowe did not flinch. In one fluid motion, honed by years of training, no one in that room could imagine. She sidestepped, trapped his arm, and used his momentum against him. The crack of his body hitting the mat was sharp, final, and unforgiving. Before anyone understood what had happened, Caldwell was face down, his arm bent at a painful angle, his body locked in place. He thrashed once, then twice, but the pressure only increased. Panic flashed across his face. His hand smacked the mat in desperate surrender. Rowe released him with the same control she had shown in the takedown. Caldwell rolled to his side, gasping for air, his pride broken faster than his body. As she straightened, her sleeve slipped back just far enough for the recruits closest to see. A glint of ink appeared, the outline unmistakable. The Naval Special Warfare Trident, earned only by those who endured one of the most punishing training pipelines in the military. Gasps spread through the formation, whispers erupting as realization dawned. Phones rose, despite regulations, lenses capturing the moment that would travel far beyond these walls. Rowe looked down at Caldwell, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the silence. Confidence keeps you alive in combat. Arrogance gets your team killed. Her words carried across the room, heavy and unforgettable. The recruits exchanged looks, their respect growing with every breath. This was not just a drill instructor. This was someone forged in battles they could not yet imagine. A simple woman in appearance, but something far more beneath the uniform. Fort Valor stretched wide across the southern landscape, a mix of old brick barracks, new steel hangars, and endless training fields cut by dusty tracks. It was a place where voices rose in cadence every morning, where discipline was measured in sweat, and where recruits learned quickly that the Army stripped away excuses as surely as it stripped away individuality. At the center of this place, moving with steady purpose, was Master Sergeant Elena Rowe. She was not loud, nor did she need to be. Her authority came from the way she walked a line of recruits with unhurried precision, boots striking a rhythm against the pavement, eyes sharp enough to catch the smallest detail. She stopped beside one young man whose blouse hung crooked. Without raising her voice, she corrected him, her tone calm but firm. The adjustment was made instantly. A few steps later, she paused again, straightening a collar here, adjusting the angle of a cap there. She never shouted, never made a scene. But the effect was the same. Spines stiffened, eyes fixed forward, no one daring to test her patience. To the casual observer, she might have seemed ordinary, a plain woman with cropped hair and simple bearing. Yet those who stood in her presence felt something layered beneath the surface, a kind of weight that came not from rank alone, but from lived experience. Among the recruits stood Private First Class Mason Caldwell, 23 years old, and already convinced the Army should bend around his name. He was the son of a colonel stationed at the Pentagon, the grandson of a decorated ranger. Confidence had been poured into him since childhood, but it had hardened into entitlement. He smirked when Rowe passed, whispering to the man beside him that women did not belong in combat, that the army only put them in uniforms to satisfy quotas. His words carried just far enough for others to hear. Drawing tension into the line like a stretched wire, Rowe paused, turning her head slightly. She did not react with anger. She simply studied Caldwell. Her gaze steady, her voice low as she gave him an extra duty for the day. The discipline was measured, precise, but it left a sting that his pride could not ignore. Caldwell clenched his jaw, already plotting how to reassert himself. Private Harper Lee, a quiet observer at the far end, noticed something the others missed. Each time a sudden sound cracked in the distance, Rowe's hand twitched briefly toward her right hip, as if checking for the weight of an M17 pistol that was not there. It was a reflex, quick and subtle, but unmistakable to anyone watching closely. Harper filed it away, her curiosity deepening. Drill instructors were strict. Yes, but Rowe carried herself like someone who had seen more than training fields. By the end of the inspection, the recruits stood straighter, not out of fear, but out of respect for the woman who commanded without noise. Rowe gave nothing away, her face unreadable, yet a sense lingered in the air that beneath the surface of this simple woman was a past no one could quite name, and for Caldwell, whose arrogance had just been checked, the clash between entitlement and authority was only beginning. The sun over Fort Valor burned hot enough to make the asphalt shimmer, and by mid-morning the heat pressed down on the recruits like a heavy pack. Sweat darkened their uniforms before the training even began. The order was clear: every soldier would complete the obstacle course within 15 minutes. Weapon discipline in mind. No excuses. At the starting line stood Master Sergeant Elena Rowe, her expression unreadable as she adjusted the strap on her cap and gestured toward the first obstacle. Without hesitation, she launched forward. Her body moved with practiced rhythm, efficient and controlled. She scaled the rope with measured steps, hands and feet working in unison, never rushing, never wasting energy. At the top, she swung her leg over and descended with the same calm precision. The low crawl came next, her frame sliding beneath the wire as if every inch of her movement had been calculated. By the time she reached the climbing wall, her breathing was steady. She gripped the wood, shifted her weight, and was over in seconds. Each transition was smooth, each landing quiet. When she crossed the finish, she had beaten the standard by several minutes, and for a moment the recruits forgot the heat, caught up in the quiet awe of what they had just seen. Then came Private First Class Mason Caldwell. He charged the course with raw power, his muscles straining, his pace furious. At first, he looked unstoppable, but his aggression bled energy quickly. By the second obstacle, his breath was ragged. On the rope, he slipped twice, cursing under his breath, forcing his body upward with sheer will. At the wall, he stalled, arms trembling as he hauled himself over, crashing down in a heap. By the time he stumbled across the finish, more than 4 minutes had passed beyond the required time. He looked up, chest heaving, just in time to see Harper Lee and 2 other female recruits finishing ahead of him with times that outpaced his own. His face flushed, not only from the sun, but from humiliation. As the recruits gathered for water, a sudden boom rolled across the training field. The sound of live-fire artillery drills from the far range. Most recruits flinched. Rowe's reaction was different. In less than a heartbeat, her right hand twitched toward her hip, the spot where an M17 pistol would sit in combat. The movement was instinct, reflex born from experience. Just as quickly, her hand dropped back to her side, her face composed as if nothing had happened. Harper saw it. She had been watching Rowe since day one, noting the small tells that didn't fit the mold of a standard drill instructor. That one subtle gesture confirmed her suspicion. Rowe carried more than authority. She carried history. Harper's respect deepened, along with her curiosity. Caldwell, meanwhile, clenched his fists, eyes burning as he stared at Rowe. He had been outperformed, outclassed, and exposed in front of everyone. His humiliation hardened into anger, and in that anger, a dangerous resolve grew. He would find a way to prove her wrong, no matter what it took. The padded training facility smelled of sweat and canvas, the air heavy with anticipation. Recruits lined the mat in formation, their faces tight with focus, as Master Sergeant Elena Rowe stepped forward. Her stance was steady, her voice calm, as she explained the principles of defensive combat: leverage over power, efficiency over wasted energy. She demonstrated simple moves with another instructor, showing how a smaller fighter could redirect force and neutralize a larger opponent. Her tone never rose, yet every word carried the weight of certainty, each motion precise and controlled. Then came the call for a volunteer. Silence stretched for a beat before Private First Class Mason Caldwell stepped out of the line. His grin was smug, his eyes filled with the promise of mischief. Everyone knew his intent. Whispers stirred at the edges of the formation, recruits glancing at one another, as if bracing for what was about to happen. Caldwell rolled his shoulders, spreading his arms like a man about to put on a show. The air inside the room thickened, each second dragging as tension climbed. Rowe gave him a simple instruction: attempt a frontal grab, the most basic training maneuver. Caldwell smirked, shifting his weight forward. Then, with deliberate disrespect, he lung it. His hands shot high, reaching in a way meant to humiliate rather than train. Gasps rippled through the formation. Time snapped taut. Rowe's body reacted before thought could catch up. A sidestep, swift and effortless. Her hand captured his wrist, twisting through the weak point in his grip. Her shoulder dropped, her hips turned, and Caldwell's momentum betrayed him. With one seamless motion, she redirected his force, and his body slammed to the mat with a thud that echoed across the hall. In a blink, his arm was locked behind his back, his chest pinned flat, his face pressed into the vinyl. The silence that followed was absolute. Caldwell squirmed, shock painted across his face. Pain edged into panic as Rowe increased the pressure. His hand smacked the mat. Once, twice, then again. The frantic tap of surrender. The recruits leaned forward in disbelief, their eyes wide, their voices caught in their throats. Rowe released him with precision. No hesitation. No glowit. Caldwell rolled onto his side, clutching his arm. His arrogance dissolved into gasps of breath. As she straightened, the edge of her sleeve slipped back, revealing the faint outline of a tattoo. Not just any ink, but the trident of naval special warfare. Harper Lee's eyes widened. She whispered under her breath, and the words spread like sparks across the room. This was no ordinary army training. This was something else. Special Forces. Rowe stood tall above Caldwell, her voice calm yet cutting. Confidence keeps you alive. Arrogance gets your team killed. The sentence landed with weight heavier than any takedown. Caldwell lowered his gaze, his pride shattered in front of everyone. Around the mat, recruits stared at their instructor with new respect, the realization dawning that the woman they had underestimated was far more than she appeared. By the time the recruits left the training facility, the story was already slipping through the cracks of regulation. Phones had been raised despite the ban. Shaky footage captured from corners of the room. By evening, the clip was whispered about in the barracks, passed between friends, each replay sharpening the disbelief. By midnight, it was circulating across military forums, stripped of context, but loaded with impact. A female drill instructor had put an arrogant recruit flat on the mat in seconds, and the world beyond Fort Valor was about to see it. By dawn, the video was everywhere. News outlets framed it with headlines that demanded attention. A woman humiliates a soldier in combat drill. Army instructor executes flawless takedown. Debate followed almost instantly. Commentators questioned whether women belonged in combat roles, while others praised the display as proof of what discipline and skill could achieve. The trident tattoo, caught in several frames, fueled speculation. This was no ordinary drill instructor. This was someone with a past tied to naval special warfare. In his office, Captain Nathan Briggs's phone rang without pause. The Pentagon wanted answers. Some calls were sharp with anger, fueled by the fact that Caldwell's father was a colonel who had already demanded accountability. Others were cautious, urging discretion, hinting that Rowe's background was more complicated than her file suggested. By 0800, Briggs had summoned her. Rowe entered with the same composure she carried on the training field. She stood at attention as Briggs leaned forward over his desk. The weight of the situation etched across his face. He told her the fallout. The video was viral. Her tattoo had been noticed. Pressure was building. Rowe's reply was measured. She had followed protocol, defended herself, and maintained order. She had done her duty, nothing more. Briggs studied hair, torn between frustration and admiration. Orders from above shifted the conversation. There would be no punishment. Instead, the directive was clear. Rowe was to begin developing an advanced combat training program, one that quietly drew from her unique experience while fitting within Army doctrine. It was a chance to turn scandal into progress. As Rowe left the office, the air outside felt heavier. What had begun as a reckless challenge on the mat had grown into something larger, a spark, pushing at the boundaries of tradition. The weight of change pressed against the walls of Fort Valor, and Elena Rowe stood at the center of it, calm and unshaken, even as the storm gathered strength. In the days after the video spread, Mason Caldwell carried humiliation like a second uniform. Whispers followed him across the barracks, and every look from his peers reminded him of the mat, the submission hold, and the sound of his own hand tapping in surrender. He thought about requesting a transfer, maybe even leaving Fort Valor altogether. When he called his father, expecting sympathy, the colonel gave him something different. Respect, he said, is earned by showing you can rise after being knocked down. Legacy cannot fight your battles for you. The words cut deeper than any public embarrassment. The next morning, Caldwell submitted a reassignment request, hoping to escape the shadow of his failure. But Captain Briggs refused it, and Rowe made him an offer instead. She was building an advanced combat training program, one that drew from special operations techniques, while remaining within Army doctrine. If Caldwell truly wanted to prove himself, he could do it here. The program was unlike anything the recruits had seen before. Rowe taught them how to use leverage, how to redirect force instead of meeting it head-on, how to think about combat as a problem of efficiency rather than power. Harper Lee adapted quickly, her movements sharp and precise. She absorbed Rowe's lessons almost instinctively, showing the poise of someone who might one day lead. Caldwell, by contrast, struggled. His strength worked against him, his old habits of brute force breaking down under the weight of new expectations. But something shifted. Instead of lashing out, Caldwell began to listen. He asked questions, repeated drills long after others had stopped, and started to measure himself, not against his name, but against his effort. His bruises piled up, but so did his progress. Slowly, his arrogance gave way to determination. Rowe noticed. During one session, she pulled him aside after he executed a move correctly for the first time. She told him that discipline and respect, not pride, were the marks of a soldier. Caldwell nodded, the words settling differently now than they once would have. For the first time, he felt he had truly earned a fragment of acknowledgement. By the end of the week, Caldwell's peers no longer looked at him with disdain. They began to see the change. He still had far to go, but his humility had replaced his entitlement. What had started as humiliation was turning into growth. And for the first time since arriving at Fort Valor, Caldwell walked with the quiet weight of someone on the path to respect. The announcement came quietly, but its weight carried far. The Department of Defense formally recognized the advanced combat training program Master Sergeant Elena Rowe had built at Fort Valor. Letters and directives were sent down the chain, naming her program as a model to be expanded across other installations. Along with the recognition came an offer. She could step into a consulting role, travel between bases, shape the Army on a larger scale. Rowe thanked them but declined the move. Her place, she said, was here, guiding recruits face to face, shaping them not with titles but with presence. One evening, Captain Briggs handed her an envelope sealed in the careful handwriting of a senior leader. Inside was a simple note, written on plain stationery. It thanked her for what she had done, acknowledging that her efforts would outlast those in command today. It spoke of quiet revolutions, of changes that shift culture in ways more enduring than speeches. Rowe folded the note carefully, storing it not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the work ahead. Later, Harper Lee approached her outside the barracks. She asked if it had all been worth it. Everything Rowe had endured to stand where she was. Rowe paused, eyes scanning the parade field where recruits moved in evening drills. She said it was never about herself. It was about creating doors that others could walk through. Harper nodded, her expression steady, carrying the kind of understanding that only comes from lived truth. As the sun sank behind the horizon, Rowe walked across the base. The sky painted in deep shades of orange and violet. She watched recruits training together, men and women side by side, their movements marked by newfound respect. Her legacy would not be headlines or fame. It would be this quiet shift, the lasting change etched into the culture of Fort Valor, carried forward by those who came next.